Good morning and welcome to another one of Drew's Book Reviews. Today's book review is going to be on The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. So this is the second book in the Kingkiller Chronicles. So for those of you who have not read it or didn't see my review on the first book in this series, titled The Name of the Wind, this is set up as day 1, day 2, and day 3. Essentially, the gist of it is we have our main character, Quoth, who, and sorry, last video I think I was calling him Voth, it's actually Quoth, but he has basically retired from his life and is running this small inn in this out-of-the-way no-name town, and this chronicler, a guy who travels the world collecting stories and writing them down, happens to come through town, and he is spending the next 3 days relaying to this chronicler his story and his life story. So it's really kind of set up as a autobiographical type work, as opposed to a typical fantasy where there's one overarching storyline and objective for our main characters. This is very different. This is just the life story of Quoth, born and raised as an Edema Rue, which is basically a traveling actors troupe who goes about the world performing for the masses, but also a group of people that's very much looked down on and despised and basically thought of as the lowest of the low in the world, the scum of the earth at the same time. And so this book, the second book, is all about some adventures he's had with his patron that he manages to pick up after he is basically forced out of the university that he's been attending, that he managed to barely scrape enough together to get into, and he's been struggling in poverty year after year after year at the university, just wanting to learn in his desperate search for information on the mysterious seven Chandrain, which are basically these demons of the Fae world and universe or dimension that are basically the incarnation of evil. The Fae, or evil Fae, or the Chandrain, is what was responsible for the death and destruction of his family and troop as a child, that led him to living in the streets of Tarbean in poverty as a street kid before he managed to work his way by some miracle to the university. So the wise man's fear says there are 3 things all wise men fear: the sea in storm, a night with no moon, and the anger of a gentleman. So as he manages to get himself this patron, which goes by the title of the Mayor, that's Maer, he is basically the richest man in the land. He's about 1,000 miles or more from the university as far as where his little kingdom is. And Quoth was brought on because of his skill with music and the spoken word and poetry. The Mayor, who has been suffering a debilitating illness, is also wanting to produce an heir before he dies. So there's this one particular woman that he's trying to win her heart and marry her, but he doesn't feel he's up to the task of winning her heart, so he hires Quoth to woo her with his words. But in this process, our main character Quoth discovers that he's actually been getting poisoned by his one trusted basically magical advisor, or sympathist, as it's called. The magic of sympathies, which is the idea of binding certain things together to have an influence or control over them, which is very interesting because there's actually kind of this voodoo style magic that's used as the basis for this magic system. So we have, well, Quoth himself had been attacked by a magic through this voodoo style magic. His attacker goes by the name of Ambrose. He's a really wealthy student at the university and basically Quoth's arch nemesis, his ultimate rival, which he's had that rivalry since day 1 at the university, essentially. But when he is working for the Mayor, his patron, he wins the patron's favor after discovering this plot of him being poisoned to keep him ill and sick for, we don't really know the ultimate reasons for that. Anyway, he discovers this plot, and then he's eventually sent off to hunt bandits for the Mayor, and eventually discovers who these bandits are. They're posing as the Edema Rue, but really they're just a bunch of violent criminals who rape and abuse the people that they come across. And this really angers Quoth. He's like, well, I am a Demaru, which is something he's kind of kept secret. Now, he hasn't exactly gone out of his way to deny his heritage. He hasn't denied it if it's ever asked of him. But he doesn't go out of his way to reveal this information either, because of how the Demaru are typically looked upon. So the lowest of the low, the scum of society. So he discovers these bandits posing as the Demaru, and this really angers him after he's offered these abused women. First, they welcome him and his family when they come across him, but they're not his family. They're not a Demaru. He discovers this when he's offered these two girls as kind of like these sex slaves, and this really pisses him off. He finds out they've been abused, and he basically goes and kills the entire troop of bandits as a result of that, and rescues these girls. This, of course, adds to his reputation as this insanely powerful magic user, and a reputation as a demon hunter. But also, as part of his adventures, he comes across a fake creature out of legend, Felurian, who basically is this seductress, very powerful seductress. She has the ability to entrap men through her pure sexual prowess, and those who ever escape her literally go insane with this pining and longing for her. But he manages to convince her to let him go and maintain his sanity, which is crazy, because nobody's ever done that before. So he's building on his reputation from that as well, which is just nuts. Overall, he's just a fantastically powerful magic user, or at least that's the reputation that's being built around him. With regard to his successes, most of his reputation is, well, it's kind of half right in a lot of senses, but still really interesting, really well built up. He's even spread some rumors about himself to kind of build his reputation up. So I guess in that sense, he's a bit vain, a bit all about himself. He wants to have this insane reputation. He wants people to think of him in ways that aren't really true, but rather make him almost look undefeatable and just immortal, so to speak. So he's really worked hard to build up his reputation. That's something that's become very important to him. So in that sense, he's kind of vain with that. But overall, I've just really enjoyed this book series. I think it's a pretty great series. Some really interesting characters, like Denna, for example. She comes and goes. She's in and out. She talks about how Denna manages to get a patron as well, but her patron's been abusing and hurting her. And she's become very secretive about it and who her patron is as well. And then we have Bast, which is of the Fae. Now, Bast seems to be Quoth's friend, Quoth's student. We don't know much about him, only that he is of the Fae. So, still don't know much about him. I was hoping to learn more about his character and what he's about in this book, but we didn't get that. Perhaps in book 3 or day 3, the Kingkiller Chronicles, we'll eventually learn more about him. Who knows? We're still waiting for that one to be released, though. A lot of people are anxiously awaiting that. The person who recommended this book series to me, he's anxiously awaiting that as well. He wants to see it come, but still nothing yet. But hey, that's my thoughts on this. And actually, just some other points on that is the Adem mercenaries, which is part of the troop that Quoth went with to hunt the bandits. The Adem mercenaries, anyway, they are this for-hire group that have a reputation for being some of the greatest fighters in the world. They're described as wearing red leather. Now, that was really interesting to me because it kind of reminded me of the Sword of Truth by Terry Goodkind. We have the Mord Sith who dress in blood red leather to hide the bloodstains of their victims. And the same kind of thought process was involved with the Adem mercenaries in their red leather outfits. So I can see that seemed to be kind of inspired from that. However, that's about where the similarities end. They are by no means not anything like the Mord Sith. Eventually, actually, with regard to the Adem mercenaries, eventually Quoth finds himself in the lands of the Adem, learning their way of life, learning their way of fighting, their skill, their path that they call the Lathani, which is supposed to be guiding force in their lives, the guiding ideological principle. And he studies with them for several months before eventually finding his way back to the university at the end of this book or this volume. And just really interesting to see the contrast of the cultural differences between the Adem, who view everyone else in the world as barbarians that couldn't possibly understand the Lethani or the right way or the true path, and the rest of the world. And they have this very interesting way of communicating. It's mostly through hand gestures and talk. It's very symbolic. It's vague. It has many interpretations and meaning. There's very few words, but depending on how the word is used, will have a completely different meaning in different contexts. And their fighting skills and the way they teach and train. There are people just really interesting the cultural dynamics set up with the Adem and Kvothe's time spent with them. Just overall, I thought it was a great read, really enjoyable. Just love the way it's done, a biography style as opposed to having one overarching plot line. It'll be really interesting to see how book 3 or day 3 of the Kingkiller Chronicles comes, because that'll be very interesting to see how that develops. Just overall, I have to say, I really, really like this series. The Name of the Wind, The Wise Man's Fear, just fantastic book. Loving it all. Really looking forward to book 3 of this series. Whenever that happens to come out, you could bet I'll be adding that onto my wish list and definitely be buying it as soon as I can. So definitely highly recommend this. Check it out. Well worth your time. I promise you, you won't regret it. Check that out and definitely enjoy that. So those are my thoughts on The Wise Man's Fear. And of course, don't forget to stay tuned. Next up, we're going to have The Shadow Throne by Django Wexler. This is the second book of the Shadow campaigns, actually. First one being The Thousand Names, one I read actually quite a while ago, so it'll be nice to get back into this series of the Shadow campaign. Don't forget to stay tuned for that. As always, links to all my social media profiles will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share around, absolutely. And tell me what you thought on The Wise Man's Fear. If you think there's anything that I left out that should have been included, anything you liked or didn't like. But overall, really enjoyed it. And don't forget to stay tuned for The Shadow Throne and check out my social media profiles. All those will be in the link or the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you're having yourself a fantastic day. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on another episode of Drew's Book Reviews.